and welcome back to episode 37 of the Women of Wrestling podcast. This is a complete flip around of a show. I am Freaky Lee Burton. I'm joined by Irish Stu Allen.
This is all wrong. I should be doing the introduction.
It's very, very wrong. I should point out right now that we are recording this on opposite sides of the Atlantic. I am sitting here in the Midlands of England.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place, no doubt. I am in the environs of Chicago, preparing for the SHIMMER weekend, this coming weekend.
You've been spending too much time in French Canada.
I do. I speak far too much French now.
But this is not good, since I don't speak any French.
Yes, hopefully everyone's had a chance to have a look at the reports and so on the Femme Fatale show last weekend. Great show. The match between Hayley Hadrian and Cheerleader Melissa particularly was an absolutely outstanding one. Also Jazz and Lufisto, all great stuff. DVD should be out soon, and the general consensus, as I put in my report, was that everyone thought it was the best show to date, and that includes the talent and the booker, so we'll take that as a good sign.
And now you're in Chicago for SHIMMER.
Yes, I am. Yes, yeah. I'm aware I don't want to lord it over you here too much because you're not.
Feel free to lord it over me.
And I'm sorry you're not here, dude. I'm going to enjoy it as much as I can, and hopefully get some coverage and some news and scoops and so on. But yeah, it's looking forward to be a pretty awesome weekend. 43 talents plus Sparkle on the show this time.
43.
Sorry. 33 talents.
Ooh.
That's better. Sorry, I was having a flashback to the last set of tapings.
I thought Dave Prazak had broken again when he said he would never have 49 talents on the show.
You might. But yeah, 33 talents on the show plus Sparkle, and things are looking good. With the slightly pared down roster, I think the overall sort of average of talent is higher than it's probably ever been.
Well, that's all coming up this weekend, but coming up on this podcast here is something which is... You sort of fell into our laps more than anything else.
Yeah, and unfortunately, given the circumstances and the fact that I can't be here for the actual interview segment of this podcast, it's one that you're having to fly solo on.
I will be perfectly fine. I do this for a living.
Indeed, yes. But yeah, no, it's one that fell into our laps. We got an email last weekend saying, hey, what about a podcast with Mickie Knuckles? And that's one that we've kind of thought on the back of our minds for the last, good year or so, because Mickie seems to be someone who's been mentioned by various people on the podcast over the years, and it seemed only logical that at some point we'd actually get a podcast with her.
And we've also had loads of requests from you guys who listen, just saying, when are you going to interview Mickie Knuckles?
Yes.
Well, today is the answer.
Indeed, and I'm going to then take this opportunity to get the hell out of here and go and watch some live wrestling, and you can hopefully everyone enjoy this interview.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll have a musical interlude. We'll be back with Mickie Knuckles. All right, well, welcome back to the Women of Wrestling podcast. Joining us is our main guest for the show. She is, as she's been dubbed, the walking episode of Cops, and has other nicknames as well that she's picked up along the way. I wanted to say hello to Mickie Knuckles. How are you?
I am great. How are you, sir?
Do you know, I'm not doing too bad at all. Thank you very much. You're somebody who we've had a lot of requests from for emails that we've had in the past, just saying, we want you to interview Mickie Knuckles. We want you to talk to Mickie Knuckles. And quite frankly, I'm just so glad that we've got the opportunity to speak to you right now.
Oh, wow. I'm happy that there's somebody wanting to hear me talk.
There's a lot of people who want to hear you talk. So, yeah, you got a big fan base out there. So hopefully we'll be able to satisfy their cravings for you.
Well, I hope so.
Well, I know that there's something that you wanted to talk about, and we will get to that. But I wanted to start pretty much at the beginning, I guess, with yourself, because I didn't know much about yourself as Mickie Knuckles apart from things that I read, Reputation, that kind of thing. And then I bought the IWA Mid-South Pride and Passion set that High Spots has, and just absorbed myself in Mickie Knuckles over the space of about 10 days. And I got some brand new impressions of you, and the one thing I wanted to ask you about, because after I did that, I did some research, and I noticed that as far as wrestling was concerned, you really got into it at a very young age.
I actually started training a week after I turned 18 and graduated high school.
And you have been watching wrestling for years before that, hadn't you?
Oh, yes. The first time I actually went to a live wrestling show, I was 5 years old, and I went to the Louisville Gardens and watched, like, I tell everybody my very first match that I've ever seen that wanted me to become a wrestler was Miss Texas, which is Miss Jackie now, versus a guy named Downtown Bruno, and she just beat the crap out of him. So I watched that in amazement. I was like, girls can do this. So
you watched Jacqueline versus Harvey Whippleman, essentially?
Yes.
That's fantastic. What a great place to start.
It was, when I first met her, I told her, she's like, oh, darling, you're making me feel old. So I felt horrible, but I mean, it was still an awe-inspiring event for me.
And then from there, you mentioned about, you started training just after your 18th birthday, but you also did a bit of backyard wrestling.
I did a lot of backyard wrestling. I actually started backyard wrestling when I was about 15.
It was around that time when backyard wrestling was really popular, wasn't it?
A little bit. Like, my brother-in-law is actually who started the backyard wrestling group, and because I always was a big fan of wrestling, he invited me in one time. And they kind of used me as like a test dummy because I was the smallest one of the group. These were guys that were normally in the 200 to 400-pound range, and they would throw me around and put me in wrestling holds and moves and put me through tables and just all kinds of stupid, crazy, silly stuff. And I kind of just got into it that way. And actually, that's how I started training, was because we were renting out a wrestling ring on Sundays from Ian Rotten in IWA Mid-South. And his wife was there, and she saw me wrestle, and she talked me into training with her husband. So,
when you look back at the backyard wrestling, is it something that you think, what was I thinking? Why did I do that? What kind of risks was I taking with my body?
No, I think I look more back on it. It was a really fun time. We were all just a whole bunch of kids that really liked wrestling, that really enjoyed being a part of it, that didn't have a lot of money, and didn't have a lot of hookups with how to get trained and things. So I think I look at it more as the fact of, if I never backyard wrestled, I don't think I would have gotten trained to be a wrestler.
So it's just like that sort of progression of life then, there's sort of no regrets in the things that you've done in the past.
Exactly. Everything leads to something.
So what was it that was said to you to train with IWA Mid-South? Was it just a case of, would you like to train to become a professional wrestler, or you just said, yes, I'd love to?
Well, it was more along the lines of, I got asked if I had any interest into it, and I said absolutely, but coming from the area that I came from, it was a very small town, and things like professional wrestling was looked upon as either you had to know somebody or you had to be born into the business. Your father had to be a wrestler or somebody of that nature. And so when I was growing up, of course, I always wanted to be a wrestler, but it was more along the lines of, I looked at it as it was something I wanted to do, but I didn't think I could ever do. And so the first instant when they said, hey, we can train you to be a wrestler, obviously your mind goes to financials. And I was like, I don't really have a whole lot of money. And it was brought to my attention that this particular school I went to had a 96% dropout rate. And
wow.
they never had a girl graduate. And so I was pretty much told that they would train me for free because they didn't think I was going to make it past the first day anyway.
So that was almost like the red rag to a bull, essentially, wasn't it?
Pretty much. It was the fire underneath my ass, I'll tell you that.
So, because you mentioned about this 96% dropout rate, I mean, that's massive. So, like, more than 19 in 20 people who go for it just don't make it to the end. How tough is this training?
It was pretty, not only physically is it tough, because I also got trained by people like Chris Hero and Bull Payne and Mark Wolf, and Shia Punk would come in on a couple of the classes and help, and Too Cold Scorpio. So I got put through a lot of the drills that most girls don't normally get put through, just because they're girls and because girls are looked at as business, as bells and whistles, not really athletics. And so I think they wanted to try to change people's minds with that. So this whole training, they treated me just like a boy. I got to go through every bit of class, but it was more physically exhausting because, for a while, everybody was really mean to me because I was the new girl. I was the greenhorn. They didn't expect me to last long. They thought I was going to quit in the first couple of weeks anyway. So it was more or less they were pushing me to try to get me to quit or to see where my heart was.
Did you come close to quitting then?
Once. I actually came close to quitting. I was going through a lot of issues with my personal family. They really did not like me wrestling. They didn't approve of it at all. They thought, I was putting myself in harm's way, in jeopardy, that I didn't need to do this. I needed to go to college. And we got into a big argument and did a big fight where I didn't talk to my family for about 4 years because of it. And during, the time that we were fighting and arguing, one of my trainers thought that they would play a joke on me, a rib per se, and the way they did it just made me so upset to where I was like, you know what, nobody likes me, why am I even here, It tested me for a little while, but then I thought, I've already gone through a year of this, if I quit now, what was it all for? And so it was pretty much the fact of somebody told me I wouldn't make it, and my hard-headedness said, oh, no, I am.
But you did make it, and you debuted in IWA Mid-South. But before you actually did your sort of wrestling debut, you were refereeing for a while, is that right?
Yeah, I did security, I did sound, I did camera work, I did refereeing, I even managed for Bull Payne. I did it all because Ian Rotten had a really great idea behind it. He pretty much said that in order to be able to do everything, you need to understand every aspect of the wrestling business. So I got thrusted into all of this. And I think it made me better off when I did debut because I kind of understand what everybody's job in the wrestling business was.
And talking about that debut, it's pretty infamous. It's on this DVD set which I talked about. Your debut match, August 2nd, 2003, against Hayley Hatred, which is pretty much known for that powerbomb on the steel chairs.
Oh, yeah. I can honestly tell you I don't remember much from that match. I remember taking a forearm and it dislocated my nose and ripped that piece of skin that connects your lip to your gum.
Ooh.
Yeah, it did all that, and that's the last thing I can really remember. I remember waking up in the locker room, looking over at Corporal Robinson and Chris Hero and saying, hey, did I do okay? And they were like, would you please stop asking us that? That's like the 15th time. I was like, I didn't remember I asked you that. And they're like, yeah, you got knocked out. You did fine, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay. So that's all I remember from that. And I went back and refed a couple matches later and finished out the night because one of the referees had to leave. So, I mean, that's all I remember from that night. But, whew, I remember it hurt. That's all.
I mean, looking back at that match, it is actually really exciting to watch, considering that was your first match and you just went for it.
Yeah. Well, I got pretty much talked to. I had Chris Hero and Ian Rotten standing on both sides of me, and they looked at me and they're like, are you ready? And I was like, I feel like I'm ready. And they're like, well, if you mess up, we're going to beat the crap out of you in training. And I was like, oh, well, they're going to mess up. They're like, yeah, don't disappoint us. Which put a lot of pressure because they've never had a girl graduate, and so I already had that on me. And they didn't really have a whole lot of girls that came through IWA at the time. They specifically brought in Hayley to wrestle me just so I could get experience because she was trained by a dispatcher, and so they thought she would be a good mix for me. And that's kind of how it went. I just got put on spot from day one.
Things sort of escalated as far as the women's division was concerned in IWA Mid-South around that time. There was a lot more girls who were coming to the area and that you were having the opportunity to wrestle. So what was that like, being able to have a lot of these names all sort of becoming part of IWA Mid-South?
Well, yeah, it was a lot. A lot of the credit has to go to Dave Prazak. When I first started wrestling, there was only two girls coming in on a normal basis. It was Lacey and Rain, and they were wrestling each other a lot. So when Dave Prazak started coming in for an announce team, he pitched an idea to Ian about bringing in more girls, because at the time I was wrestling nothing but guys. So Prazak's the one that actually started the women's division in IWA as I guess, a trial basis on what SHIMMER is today. I guess he wanted to see if the general male population would be into something like that, a competitive women's sport, things like that. So all the credit for the women's division has to go to Prazak, because without him actually pushing that and, say, hey, we need to bring in this girl, we need to bring in that girl, I really don't know if Ian would have brought him in, because he was pretty content with me wrestling girls for the longest time. It was interesting because a lot of girls, I was always led to believe that I was different because I trained like a boy, but the girls that Prazak was bringing in were more like me. It wasn't like, me going to these other shows and seeing these girls that didn't want to, get hit. If you touched their hair, they got mad, and, if they broke a nail, they got mad and everything else. It wasn't necessarily like that. It was these girls were just like every other wrestler. Like guy wrestlers, they wanted to get in there. If they got a black eye, they thought it was great for the business, and it was really refreshing to find out that I wasn't just as psycho and crazy as everybody made me out to be, because I wanted to be like this. And then to find other girls that were like this. I mean, to this day, Sarah Del Rey is still a good friend of mine. Even after the whole leg incident, which had nothing to do with her, that was my fault completely. But because of us being put together very young in our career and kind of growing and learning together, now I have a friend like that. Just like Mercedes Martinez, I got to work with her when I was still really young. Lexi Five, me and Daisy Hayes, for a good 4 to 5 months, I was wrestling nobody else but Daisy Hayes. And I got to learn how to work with somebody that small and then turn around and work with somebody like Mischief, who was about the same size, if not a little bit taller than me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a great environment to be around. It was the first type of environment like that I had been around, where girls were actually respected as wrestlers and not looked at as bells and whistles in TNA.
I mentioned at the start about how I had an impression of Mickie Knuckles, and the impression that I had was, the sort of brawling type wrestler. But if you look back at the names that you're wrestling and the people you're wrestling and the times that you're wrestling, there was a lot of actual wrestling involved. You are a very sound technical wrestler as well.
Well, thank you. That has to do with Chris Hero. I give Chris Hero credit on that. He forced me to push past what I thought I knew about wrestling, what I liked about wrestling, to other aspects of wrestling, and trying to turn it into my own. So if anybody ever has a chance to train with Chris Hero, I would highly recommend it.
He's just made his debut in FCW as well. Are you keeping up with how he's doing as Cassius Ohno?
I am so proud he did. I can't think of a nicer person. Other than Matt Sydal when he went to WWE as Evan Bourne, I think Chris is like the second nice person. And I think he deserves it. He's worked so hard from going, from a kid from Ohio that's just driving up and down the road getting bookings where he can, to becoming probably one of the most respected, greatest technical wrestlers that I've ever seen in the ring. Because I don't think I've ever seen a match with Chris, especially now, that hasn't been somewhat exciting and it constantly keeps you enthralled. And Chris is one of those guys that you just can't help but to watch in the ring, because he's always improving, always evolving. He's a true student of the game. So I'm really proud that he actually went down there. I know a lot of other people are behind him, and I hope he does great.
Just getting back to yourself then, and about IWA Mid-South, one of the sort of big flagship rites of passage kind of moments that you mentioned about Dave Prazak doing a lot of the booking as far as the women's division is concerned was the Volcano Girls show, where you're crowning, and let me get this right, an NWA Midwest and IWA Mid-South women's champion. Now, this was a big thing, wasn't it? Because you mentioned about how it was almost like a testing bed for Shimmer, but Volcano Girls was pretty much the first show to see if people would buy into a show that had primarily women's wrestling on it.
Absolutely, and I think it became a huge success. The DVD sales alone rivaled that of King of the Deathmatch from that year, and King of the Deathmatch for the longest time was one of IWA Mid-South's biggest sellers. And so I think after the amount of press and popularity, that everybody got off that, including the girls, including Dave Prazak, I think that led, all promoters. I mean, if you've never noticed now, there's a lot of different promoters that are starting to run all-girl shows, that have been running all-girl shows since that, because it was believed to be, like I said, that women's wrestling was the bells and whistles. It wasn't looked at as competitive. Well, Dave Prazak put it in a whole new light and gave women, a respectable way to say, I am a pro wrestler. Yes, I could be pretty, or yes, I could be cute, but I will kick your teeth in. And I think the Volcano Girls, and with things like SHIMMER and now WSU and AIWs, coming along with their women's show, and there's more women's show coming out in California area. I think that I really don't think that they would exist without Dave Prazak pushing that envelope and saying, I'm going to run an all-girls show, and there's not going to be any guys matches on it, and we're going to see where this leads.
Bit of a risk, I guess, though, because if it tanks, it kind of says, well, where does that leave all you girls?
I think it was more or less a fact of all of, and we all got a pep talk before, like in the locker room, but all of us were basically told, look, this is the way the women's divisions in any of the companies are looked at. People don't respect them. People, don't acknowledge them per se. They just see them as an extra add-on to a show. It's kind of like a novelty match, like a midget match. And he actually empowered us. He said, look, I believe in you guys. I need you all to believe in you guys. This will work. If you all work with me, if you all put your best foot out there, I know we can do this. And I think that's why all of us tried so hard. We all left it all out there because inevitably, it was a big risk, but what really had we got to lose? We could either stay the same way we were, where people would still book us as bells and whistles, or we can advance to where, now you have women's matches headlining any wrestling card, and people are excited to go see these.
Around that time, we're talking about how IWA Mid-South was becoming a sort of a hotbed for women's wrestling. It seems like there was a lot of women who were coming into that area, and you were already there. And because you were a graduate of IWA Mid-South, and you were always there, you're almost like the resident woman, was there ever that feeling that people thought that you may be getting preferential treatment in the fact that all these women are coming to you rather than maybe you going to other places?
I really don't think I've ever felt that way, because most of the girls that I have been put in the ring with that have been brought to IWA, we actually, I don't know if it was like a building of a bonding experience or what, but I've never experienced any cattiness or anything like that, and there's never been any negativity to a girl going, well, why do you get to wrestle everybody? I want to do this. I think they pretty much knew, because I was mainstay IWA, that the reason we were trying the women's division is because Prazak did not want me wrestling men anymore. They already knew this. I mean, I had a lot of girls, tell me before that they think that without me actually wrestling for IWA, they don't think Volcano Girls would have been happened, which I don't know if it has or not. And to me, that just makes it seem like these girls understand what was happening, but without them, it couldn't have happened. So I think they realized that I needed them just as much as, IWA needed girls to come in for me to wrestle.
It's very flattering, though, isn't it, that people say that without you, there may not have been the roll-on like Volcano Girls, which in turn led to things like Shimmer and other women promotion. It's almost like you are the nucleus for the whole thing.
I don't know if I believe that. I think in some form or fashion it would have still evolved with or without me. I think I was just lucky enough to be a part of it.
Well, you ended up winning the IWA Mid-South, NWA Midwest, I'm always going to get that wrong, Women's Championship. And it was 2005, but, it didn't last for very long. It only lasted for about 6 days. What happened?
Ed Schumann tried to say that he didn't sanction the match. So therefore, if he didn't sanction the match, because it took place in Philadelphia, it's when IWA went to Philly for a show, and Ed Schumann tried saying that he didn't sanction the match. Therefore, if he didn't sanction the match and he was a member of the NWA, that it wasn't sanctioned. Therefore, the belt never actually came to me, which Ian argued with that rightfully so. He thought I won the belt, so they just split the belts entirely.
It just sounds a bit like shenanigans, really.
Oh, yeah, it was. But it was a whole struggle between Ian and Ed Schumann on who had control of what. It was basically two bullheads, coming together and ramming each other, trying to, make the other one move, and nobody wanted to budge. So they came to terms and said, fine, we'll just split the belts, and NWA will have nothing to do with the IWA Women's Champion, and so there's nothing really I could do about that. But
splitting those belts came roughly about the same time that Dave Prazak sort of split from IWA Mid-South and Shimmer was set up. There was a lot of names who were part of Volcano Girls and were also part of IWA Mid-South who became part of Shimmer, but even though you sort of lived around the area, you weren't one of them. Why is that?
I have no idea. I talked to Dave Prazak one time about me coming into Shimmer, and then since then we really haven't talked about it. And I don't think it's necessarily that we couldn't work together. I just think that maybe I'm not something that Dave Prazak is interested in having in the Shimmer.
When was that? When was that conversation?
That was shortly right before I left IWA, probably in 2008, 2009.
All right, so I guess it was a few years after Shimmer had started, but still a few years since that actual conversation.
And I think Ian and Dave Prazak also had a bad falling out, And so I don't really think they wanted to deal with Ian Rotten, and therefore didn't want to deal, because at the time Ian was taking my bookings for me because he was my trainer, and I was trying to respect that boundary.
Well, roughly after that sort of split happened, IWA Mid-South and yourself went down a sort of different direction, and sort of the Queen of the Deathmatch tournament started.
Yeah, that was a fail.
Well, I was going to ask about that, because how did that all come about? Was it a case of, this was just a sort of natural evolution? Because you had done some bloody matches in the past. You'd had cage matches with Mischief and things like that. Was it more of a progression of that? Who came up with the idea of Queen of the Deathmatch?
Ian actually did, because he did not want... I was in King of the Deathmatch. I actually pushed myself to be on King of the Deathmatch because I'm not a thin, pretty girl. I'm not somebody that's going to attract somebody's eyes or anything like that, and I'm not naturally quick because I am a bigger girl. And I needed to find something to make myself a commodity, because in this business, either you make yourself something that somebody wants to promote and book and can use for their own personal gain, or you don't get booked at all. So in my mindset, I got to thinking about there's not a lot of American girls that did death matches. And I had already tried to teeter into the deathmatch scene with Bullpain and Ian and all them. And so I kind of forced myself into King of the Deathmatch a couple of years. It was pretty much a constant, hey, you should let me do this. Japanese girls do that. Why isn't it good enough for me? Blah, 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 blah. To the point of where Ian got ticked off and said, fine, you want to be in King of the Death, you'll wrestle me. Eventually, after a couple of King of the Deaths, Ian started saying, look, we can't keep having you King of the Death. You're wrestling guys in King of the Death. I'd rather you wrestle girls. But we don't really want to have a girls match on King of the Death. Let's make a whole new tournament, and you can find girls to wrestle it. And then every year we tried to book girls for it. We would get girls saying, yeah, I would love to come, and then turn around and not show up the day of the show. So we'd have several no-shows and, call-ins and things like that. And it was just a big mess and more of a headache than I ever actually wanted to be involved in. So, yeah.
Well, when you talk about the nerves inside and that kind of thing, just looking at some of the matches which took place, I mean, just for the 2006 tournament, for instance, the Unlucky 13 Staple Gun Death Match, a Thumbtack Death Match, Type A Death Match, and then a no-rope, barbed wire, electrified light tubes, Franz Bring the Weapons Steel Cage Match. I mean, this is the sort of thing that would really make somebody nervous. I'm assuming you must have been nervous about it as well.
I'd already been groomed into... I was crazy. I was young and naive. I thought I had Superman syndrome where I would never get hurt because I had never really been hurt. I had been cut and bruised and I've broken my fingers and toes, but nothing really major. So I think I was okay and used to it. I thought it was like a rite of passage of, something like a badge to show people, look, I can do this. Women can do this and be just like the men. All girls can do this if you want to. I don't think I was nervous. Now, I do know a lot of the girls were nervous because it was the first time they had ever done anything like that. And a lot of girls didn't even know they were going to do it. They showed up with their trainer and who vouched for them, and the trainer said, yes, please use my girl. She needs experience. And, not knowing they hadn't been used before, they kind of got thrown into that. And I felt bad when I realized, this is their first match, and I was like, I really don't want to use them because this is going to be scary. No, they'll be fine. They'll be fine. They're just like you. And I know a lot of girls are nervous because it's not natural for, girls to cut themselves up. It's not natural for girls to, get thumbtacks in their head and light tubes, swung across their face. And it's not something that every girl goes up and saying, oh, I want to do that. With that being said, I think a lot of girls, even though they were scared, they got over their own fears. And they progressed with it, and they learned from it. And I think more girls benefited, especially with having somebody like Lufisto. Lufisto was one of the very first girls that I got to meet that did anything like what I did. And so getting to talk to her and get her opinions about things and her viewpoints about things and stuff, I think all the girls learned from that. So.
One, you mentioned about girls who debuted at the deathmatch tournaments. One of them was a young lady who went by the name of Rachel Putsky at the time, now Rachel Summerlyn. When we spoke to her, she said that when she was asked, we said, why did you do this? Her answer was pretty much, well, why not?
That sounds like Rachel.
And you've worked with her a few times. You worked with her in IWA Mid-South. You also worked with her in ACW as well. What do you remember?
Rachel is a phenomenal girl. And you know, being under the name Putski, you know, you have a lot to live up to, especially being a girl. She was known for her gigantic boobs. She knew this. When we brought her in, you know, she pretty much said, I don't want people to look at me like this anymore. I want people to know that I'm here, that I'm a competitor, and anything I do, I want people to recognize, you know, my name in along with lines of, you know, Mercedes Martinez, Sarah Del Rey, all these other girls. And she put herself in that position, one, because her husband at the time was also doing death matches, and I think she wanted to kind of show him up a little bit because it was kind of led to believe that, you know, oh, you're not going to be able to do this, blah, blah, blah. I think she did it more along the lines to prove to herself that she was as good as she thought she was. So Rachel has always been a sweetheart, though, and having her in the locker room was so much fun, especially when she came back. She had blood all over her face, and she's just smiling. She's like, I can't believe I did that. That was so cool. So to watch her just kind of being, it was kind of weird with the blood on her face and how shiny and happy she was about it. But, you know, I think she learned a lot about herself, and she pushed herself to a limit she thought she wasn't going to be able to do, and I think that let her grow as a wrestler.
Is that a sense of euphoria when you come back, and you got blood down your face? You're probably in pain. You might be cut up a bit, and is it that sense of adrenaline rush that you get?
I think yeah. It's just like with wrestling, you get an adrenaline rush, except more with deathmatch style. You know, the adrenaline rush helps with the pain. Because at the time, you know, even after you step out of the ring, you're still not feeling the full effects of the light fuse or the thumbtack. And you don't really feel it until you start to calm down in the locker room. Then you're like, oh, I have these in my head, or I have these in my back. What am I going to do? Like I know plenty of times I've gotten slit wide open someplace, and I didn't even notice it until I went to go shower and clean up, and I was like, oh, where'd that come from? And then it's kind of weird to see a group of girls, especially like 8 or 9 girls, covered in blood and cuts and bruises and things, and they're all happy about this. They're excited they got to do something in the States that's only been seen one other time in Japan, you know. It's the only other place that the girls' death matches have ever been seen like that. So I think it was very euphoric, but I also believe that, I don't know, it's kind of like therapy in a way. Weird as that sounds, it makes sense to us, I swear.
I'll take your word for it. I don't want to get hit in the head with a light tube to find out. The following year, 2007, it didn't have as many sort of names. So I think, like you said, that people sort of back out when they hear about it, and because they'd been won the year before, people kind of had an idea about what was going to happen. And like you said, there were replacements on hand for a few people. One of them, who we spoke about with Roxy Cotton, was a lady by the name of BB Walls.
Yeah.
Okay, that giggle. I think you know where I'm going with this.
Okay. That's the girl I was telling you about, where the trainer brings them to me and says, no, this girl's great. She's just like you. It'll be great. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine. I'll take care of her, blah, blah, blah. And it didn't work out that way.
I don't know if anybody's seen the match, but you look at that match and it's just, you kind of feel a bit awkward watching it, because you're thinking, this girl doesn't know
I didn't know she got knocked out at the beginning of the match.
Did she?
She was that's why she kept standing there like that. I didn't know it. I thought she was just trying to be tough. And I'm like, oh, please work with me on this. I don't want us to kill each other, blah, blah, blah. But she just kept, it looked to me like she kept bucking up. What I didn't realize is, I guess during one of the things earlier, she had got knocked for a loop. And because I guess she kind of like was on auto mode or whatever, she really didn't know what else to do. And after the match, I even tried talking to her, and she's like, oh, when are we wrestling? What happened? And I'm like, oh, wow. I was like, when did you get knocked out and everything else? And she quickly quit wrestling after that, though.
You did seem rather upset at the end of the match.
I was very young, and being a very young person in there, and, you know, especially when you have your trainer yelling at you from halfway across the gymnasium screaming, you better kill her, da-da-da-da-da. You know, it's a lot of pressure on you because, you know, I don't know if anybody's been yelled at by Ian Rotten, but it's not nice. It's not pretty. Nobody ever wants, And I'm one of these people, I don't like to cause ripples in anybody else's water. I don't like people to be mad at me, so I try to keep everything as calm as possible. When he's yelling at me, and the fans can see what she's doing, and I'm mistaking that as she's trying to be tough and she's trying to show, not only me up, but all these other girls up, because basically what she did was kill everything because the other girls, are working their tail off and everything, all that added in together, and me being as young as I was, I took that the wrong way as I thought she was being disrespectful. And
I guess it must get to that point,
now I know
though.
better.
Yeah, I was going to say, I guess you must get to that point where you look at it and you're thinking, I need to try and rescue this match somehow.
Well, that's why I hate it, because I'm one of these people. I can't really do anything to anybody without being mad. And I don't want to hurt nobody. The point of the wrestling is not to hurt somebody where they can't walk away from a match, but to wrestle and to put on a competitive show so people like watching it and people ooh and ah and the brutality in it, because obviously you're going to get hit. It's wrestling. Wrestling is a contact thing, sport, whatever. And I don't really know exactly. I know I gave her the bat and told her she better hit me and make me mad. And I know she hit me in the face twice with the barbed wire bat. Thus the fact that I kicked her in the face with the thumbtack bat. But I remember, like I said, after she came to in the back, I started talking to her and then realized that was her very first match. I had no idea it was the very first match. I just know her trainer came to me and said, oh, no, she's great, she's fine, she knows how to do all this, it'll be perfect, blah, blah, blah. And you've got to take that into account, too, when people tell you, yeah, I trained this person, and they're okay to go and everything else. You take that into account and you think, well, but if she says she's trained and she's their trainer, obviously she's trained. But then you use her.
Yeah.
Which was a mistake I learned from.
Well, let's skip forward to 2008, because it's a busy year for you, and I wanted to go in it chronologically, because there was kind of 4 big points. But the first one is one that just, it still blows my mind to this very day. You were on Jerry Springer.
Yeah. Yeah, what else do you want me to say? Yeah, I was. I got a call from Greg Younger, and he's like, oh, we want to do this, and we really need you to do this. And I'm like, oh, okay, what is it? He's like, well, me and Guy Hurd, Dustin are going to team up together, and we're going to go on there, and da-da-da, and you and Scotty can go on there. And so it all led around to I was dating David, and he went to the Army, but didn't tell me he was in the Army, and I cheated on him with my friend Scott. I still get hate mail of people going, I can't believe you did that to a guy that's been in the war. And I'm like, okay, calm down. It's okay.
Just
breathe. It's going to be okay.
I had to ask you about that, because I watched that and I'm thinking, I guess if you don't sort of know any better, you're looking and thinking, oh, that bitch. But I guess with Jerry Springer, it's probably more pantomime than many things out there.
I am not actually allowed to talk about anything until I signed a contract.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, we will skip on.
They're very legal.
Well,
everything's very legal. So.
Well, we will definitely skip on. We don't want to annoy the Springer.
No, we don't.
You debuted in TNA as well, and tell us a bit about that. How that came about, because this must have been pretty much the massive high point so far in your career.
I had done a show up in Milwaukee for a guy named Carmine Despirito, and I had wrestled Mischief, where Mischief gave me a reverse Frankensteiner, and it tore a lumbar in my back that night. I had taken another booking for the next day in Chicago for Ed Schumann. Now, I hate canceling bookings. I hate not fulfilling my obligation, because I feel like it's shipping people out of things. So I went ahead and did the booking. When you tear something like your lumbar, you can't bend over, you can't really stand up. It's the most uncomfortable thing in the world, because the lumbar muscle is that muscle right in your lower back that controls all that. It's right on your sciatic nerve. And the way I had torn it, it was still hitting my sciatic nerve. So the next day I went into Schumann's show, and I taped up my midsection, and me and this stripper wrestling again, and I begged her. I said, look, please don't touch my back. I don't know what's wrong with this. But if you have to, you can work my stomach. Going through the match, Mischief forgot a couple of times, kept bending me over backwards on her knee and stuff, and that really hurt. But when I got out of the ring and I came to the back, Schumann asked me if I was okay. I told him I was fine. I went ahead and started getting dressed as best I could. Well, in the locker room was Terry Taylor. And I had met him once before, I think, but I didn't really converse with him as much. So Terry came up to me and goes, "You're hurt, aren't you?" And I was like, "Oh, how can you tell?" He's like, "Oh, you can barely get in the ring. What's wrong?" So I told him. He's like, "Why didn't you just take tonight off?" I was like, "Well, I already promised I would be here, and I like to keep my obligations, everything else." About a couple months later, Terry Taylor called me on the phone, and he goes, "What are you doing Monday through Wednesday?" And I was like, "Nothing. Why?" He goes, "Do you want to fly down to Florida and do this TV taping?" And I was like, "Oh, you're joking me, right?" He said, "No, I'm dead serious. We'd love to have you down, see if you're a good fit for us, and maybe lead to something else." So I said, "Yeah." They flew me down. I got to the TV taping, and there's Jeff Jarrett's theater right next to Samoa Joe and AJ. Well, I've met Samoa Joe and AJ because Ian used to bring them in all the time. And so they already knew me, and they were already talking to Jarrett about me. And Jeff Jarrett came up and he goes, "So I heard you can take an ass whooping." I said, "If that's what you want." He's like, "I also heard you can give it back as good as you get it." I was like, "Well, if that's what you're paying me for, absolutely." And he started smiling. He's like, "Well, you're on great." So then I started doing the debut for the TNA. I went ahead and did the pay-per-view. That was my second show. I did a couple more house shows and then broke my leg. So,
well, in that time as well, you obviously had a new name because they always change names in WWE and TNA, well, and yeah. I guess it's a copyright, yeah.
Well, my legal name is Mickie Knuckles. That's my birth name.
I was going to, before we go on any more with that, I've got to say, with a name like Mickie Knuckles, there's no way you're going to be a librarian or a primary school teacher or anything like that, are you?
There's no way you're going to have a subtle job. There's just not. You're either going to be a police officer, a mafia, or a wrestler. It's one of those three. So.
But then I guess because they maybe not keen on using your real name, they wanted to give you a character name.
Well, it was more along the lines that they couldn't own the copyright because you can't own the copyright to somebody's birth name. So when I debuted, they told me to wear my regular gear. At the time, I had the green trunks that were given to me when I started wrestling. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll bring, the nicest pair of trunks I have. I didn't want to look bad on TV, worse than what I already do. And so it had the M and the K on the other side. And you really couldn't see the Mickie above the brass knuckles on the butt. So they kind of just changed the M to Moose, kept the Knuckles because who wouldn't like the last name Knuckles, and went along with that.
You mentioned you weren't there for long, just because of certain circumstances. But in between the breaking of your leg, there was the 2008 Queen of the Deathmatch tournament, which was a pretty controversial thing.
Mm-hmm. What it basically was we had too many girls call in. It was last year I ran it because after that I didn't want to run it anymore. We had way too many girls call in. And so we were trying to find somebody to fill a spot so we didn't have to do a round-robin tournament. And Tank, which was a guy that I had wrestled for in King of the Death Matches, was there. And he was like, "Oh, I'll put myself in Queen of the Death Match. Let me wrestle Mickie." And Tank's about 400 pounds. And Mike Burns came back. He's like, "No, I got a better idea." He said, "There's a guy here that came all the way from Carolina, and he's, on the internet all the time talking about how he's the next big deathmatch star." And we asked him and said, "Oh, is this kid trained?" He's like, "Yeah, he's trained. I know his trainer. He's all good. If he wants to be used, why don't you use him?" So we pull him in the back and we talked a little bit and we let him explain to him how the match was supposed to go. And he said, fine. We get out there and the match didn't go like we explained it to him. I did not beat that kid up. I was a little rough on him, but, when I walk away from the match looking worse than that kid walked away from the match looking, I did not beat up that kid. I apologize. I did do one thing that I really wish I didn't do, which was the side swipe with the light tube. That was out of frustration and a little bit of anger. But during the match, you could see me walking away from this kid, trying to give him time to sell, trying to give him time to calm down, because it was like, it's like pushing a brick wall. When the brick wall doesn't go anywhere, you're going to get frustrated with it. After the match, kid came back to the locker room, would shake my hand. I told him to give me a couple minutes to calm down. He went out there. We drank a beer together. We waited for the match to end. He went to his hotel room, got cleaned up, came back. He paid to get into King of the Death Matches after we told him he didn't have to pay because he worked. He got into King of the Death Match, watched the whole show, waited till the show ended, and then helped us take down the ring, even though I told him he didn't have to. He sounded like everything was fine. Then a couple of days later, we get a call from the police department saying that they're investigating file charges against us on battery and assault, to where the police she basically watched it, and because he was a wrestling fan, because he knew the wrestling business, he basically said nothing was out of place here. Yeah, she was a little rough on him, but she didn't do anything that was threatening his life. I don't see any reasons to pursue this. And so the police chief actually called off the investigation.
Looking back, I mean, is that something where you think, I kind of wish that hadn't have happened?
I really wish we would have gone with our first instinct and used Tank, because I trust Tank and Tank trusts me, and I think that would have worked out fine. I think basically that gave that kid his name. Have you ever seen the movie Young Guns? Where Emilio Estevez says, "Hey kid, I'll make you famous"? That's kind of what happened. Because without that, nobody would really know his name. He built his name off of that. And then, he was okay with everything until people started saying, "Oh, that looks brutal, you need to press charges, they beat the crap out of you, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that." And it wasn't until these other people started telling him, "Oh, you got beat up." Because for a little while, I asked several people, and they were like, "No, he said he was fine, he didn't get beat up, he had a great time." And then, it went from that in a month to going to, "Well, he said you all beat him up, and he said he had no idea about any of it, and blah, 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 blah." So take that for what you will. I think it's him trying to grasp onto that fame and make it a little bit more rambunctious than what it was. But, yeah.
Do you reckon then, just from your perspective, from what you said, that he could have maybe sort of was pleading a little bit ignorant to try and curry a bit of sympathy?
I think so. I really do think so. I mean, I have no ill will towards Mike Levy at all. I still to this day, I've seen a couple of his YouTube things, and I think they're kind of funny. They're done in poor taste, and the promos are horrible, but they're funny. And anything that will allow somebody to do something they love, like wrestling, then go ahead and try to build off of it. I just think he took advantage of a situation, which I can't say that nobody else that I know wouldn't have done the same thing. And so in that aspect, I guess he was pretty smart. And he tried to build his name further off of something that probably would have gone unnoticed by most people.
And then just to top off your roller coaster of a summer, we then come to the leg breaking incident. All these things happening within a couple of months of each other. And
yeah.
And tell us a bit about that, because you mentioned it was against Sarah Del Rey. You jumped off a ledge really, and it broke. And
we were the main event of an all-guy card, and we pretty much got pulled to the side and talked to by Ian before our match. And he said, "Look, all these other guys have done these things. I really think you want me to do this thing. You're a main event of this card. You're going up against guys. You need to give them something." And to the point of, I had a bruise on my leg previously from TNA, where it was a shopping cart hit the middle of my femur. And I didn't think nothing of it because, like I said, I was young and naive and stupid and thought I would never get hurt. And I specifically told Del Rey, "Look, this is really tender. If you could avoid that, that would be great. If not, I'm just letting you know." So we talked about this, and I told her I wasn't comfortable with the dive. He pretty much insisted that I go ahead and do it anyway. So in order to appease not only my boss at the time, who was the promoter and the guy that trained me, but also to do what he thought the crowd would want to see, I wanted to make everybody happy. And halfway through the dive, I guessed myself, because I'm a big girl. I'm kind of fat. I'm not going to lie. I tell people this all the time. It's not news to me. And to come down on somebody like Del Rey, I didn't want to take the chance of hurting my friends. Like I said, what we do is a very contact sport, but inevitably we want everybody to be able to walk away from every match. Because that's how you know you did a good job. Yeah, you can hit each other and beat the crap out of each other and everything else, but when you walk away from it and nobody's got life-ending injuries, it's a great and wonderful thing. And halfway through, I second-guessed my jump, and I didn't want to land on her fully. I didn't want to hurt her fully, or anything like that. So when I came down, I put my legs underneath me to try to take some of the impact, and the side where my bruise was on, the knee had buckled, and the femur just snapped right in half. I mean, it was a clean break. There's not much that could have been done about it. I couldn't have progressed on from the match because it looked like a rainbow. My kneecap was touching on the ground while I was trying to roll the other way. So
when that happened, I'm assuming one of the first things that went through your head was, what's going to happen with this sort of TNA deal? Obviously, after the "ow, this really hurts" part.
Well, I actually didn't feel the pain until I tried to roll. Because I didn't know what had happened, but I also didn't want Del Rey to see if any, because I thought I just blew my hip out of the socket. And I was praying I just blew my hip out of the socket. When I tried to roll over, it wasn't until then that I actually, like, the pain started hitting. And when that happened, it was more or less of like, I saw the look on Ian and Patty's face. They were horrified. Ian was upset. You know, I knew that me going to TNA was a good deal for IWA. You know, it brought nameplay to IWA. So I didn't want anybody to be disappointed. So it was more or less along the lines of, oh, now everybody's going to be disappointed. You know, what did I do? I messed up. It's all my fault. I'm a very self-blaming person. I am quick to take the blame on anything. If I did something wrong, I will tell you I'm sorry, but it is all my fault. I've always been this way. And it was kind of like that with even in the hospital. I was apologizing to Sarah Del Rey and to Daphne and, you know, to Joey Eastman. And they had, you know, the couple of them didn't have anything to do with it, call it the morphine or whatever, but I was apologizing to everybody because I felt like, you know, IWA was doing so well that as far as name draw and stuff was going, that all I wanted to do was help that because my blood, sweat, and tears went into IWA. For 8 years, I worked for IWA, putting up and taking down the ring and everything else, and I didn't want people to be disappointed in me because I had put so much of my heart into it. You know, it just broke my heart to think about it.
Well, you recovered from that injury, and subsequently after that, like you mentioned before, you left IWA and you started working in a few more other places. For example, places like Juggalo Championship Wrestling. You mentioned WSU and AIW, but you also worked in OVW as well, Ohio Valley Wrestling, where you pretty much had only two other characters apart from Mickie Knuckles. So you've had the Moose, but then you've also had Izza Belle Smothers.
Yes, I do. Izza Belle Smothers was actually created by JCW. It was created because they wanted somebody to be with Tracy to help Tracy because Tracy, those jugglers hate Tracy. They were constantly throwing stuff at him. They would constantly try to hit him, you know, and I was wrestling for JCW one time, and I was wrestling Tracy's match against Too Tough Tony, and, you know, Tracy Smothers goes in the crowd with Tony, and they're beating each other up, and next thing you know, this broad pushes through the security people, and she's a big girl, and she had a ring in her hand, and she punched Tracy right in the mouth and split his lip open.
Ooh.
And me being a wrestler, I was always told that if somebody attacks you, you have to stop them because they could seriously either hurt you or hurt the person you're working with, and it looks bad on wrestling. So I jacked the girl up and basically let her know that was not okay. And I went in the back and got told that I was going to get fired, that I was going to get in trouble, yada, yada, yada. So I went up to the, you know, Violent Day and Shaggy and told them, I was like, look, I'm really sorry. She did this. And they're like, oh, how would you like to be put with Tracy Smothers as his illegitimate daughter? I was like, great, awesome. I got a job out of it. And then when Tracy found out he had a daughter in Izza Belle, he wanted me to come on the road and help him train his daughter because I wasn't going to come back to wrestling after my leg healed. I was pretty much turned off from wrestling. I had a bad falling out with IWA, Mid-South and its members, and I didn't want anything to do with the wrestling business. I was very sour on it, especially since it took 2 surgeries and 2 years for my leg to actually heal. I had wrestled for about a year with my leg still broke and not knowing it because the doctors kept telling me I was healed and I was ready. TNA, you know, can't wait around forever, so I lost that deal. And I just really wanted nothing to do with it. So Tracy talked me back into it. And then Al Snow was booking for OVW, and I had met Al quite a few times. I know his wife pretty well. And he was like, hey, how about you guys come in and try your gimmick here as, you know, the STDs, the Smothers Twisted Daughters. And so we tried it there, and it was funny because she plays the annoying little sister, and I played the older, mean, you know, bully sister, and it worked out great.
Just as a comparison, I always equated the Smothered Twisted Daughters to be like Pinky and the Brain.
Yeah, pretty much. I was Brain, she was Pinky.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I like that analogy, actually.
But then also you were doing some single stuff, and you did end up winning the OVW Women's title. But again, like with the NWA Midwest, IWA Mid-South Women's title, it wasn't a long reign. You only held the belt for 3 weeks before losing it back to Lady JoJo.
Well, it was surprising when I lost it when I won it anyways, because I wasn't a member of OVW. I wasn't being trained by them. I never attended their school, and they really prefer all their members to attend their school to go with their way of wrestling. So I was an outsider coming in, so I couldn't believe they put it on me in the beginning. When they took it off of me, you know, it was kind of like I knew it was coming because I felt a sense of a lot of the girls were not happy that they kind of put it on me anyway, which I completely understand. You know, when you pay, you know, $5,000 to go to a wrestling school with the promise that you're going to be put on the wrestling cards and be pushed as one of their top people, you know, I would probably be a little ticked off too. So when they took it off me, I really wasn't sad about it, especially since, you know, shortly after that, I stopped working OVW because of all the drama and stuff in the locker room.
Is that what happened then? Because I know that you sort of left at the end of the year.
Yeah, I don't really like guys trying to talk to me like I'm a whore. And, you know, it's not just me that they did it to. It was all the girls. They pretty much put down, you know, the girls had their own locker room upstairs all by themselves, you know, secluded off from the rest of the guys. And it was really... Yeah, it wasn't the most ideal situation, and I don't really think I approved it or appreciated it a lot. And to be in the locker room, I always got into a fight with this one guy who thought he was just king shit. And I'm telling you right now, I probably could have beat the crap out of him, and nobody probably would have said anything because nobody likes him. And it just was a bad environment to be in. I did not like the environment. You couldn't grow with the environment, and I think so.
So as far as, I mean, OVW has this reputation of producing some great stars. Now it's got this working relationship with TNA. Do you look back at it and think, well, that could have been maybe my ticket to get back into TNA?
Well, you have to understand something. When I first went to TNA, I never figured I would be anywhere like that. I don't think I ever thought I would be on WWE or TNA. My place I always felt was, you know, in Japan. That's where I always aimed for. It's where I always shot for, and I was always hoping to go to Japan. So TNA, even though it was a fun time, it was a learning experience, it was something that, you know, was him a surprise. You know, I don't really think I went to OVW with hopes of going to TNA. And certain people there tried to hold that over my head. They wanted me to come back, and they were like, "Well, if you ever want to get in TNA again, you know, you'll come back and do this." Well, I don't want to have to push myself on TNA by doing something I'm not comfortable with around people that I absolutely despise. And I guess that makes me different because I'm not willing to play politics. I hate the wrestling business. I love wrestling. I hate the business part of it. And I guess that's going to always be my downfall. I hate the drama. I hate the business, you know, aspect of where people want to feel like they're, you know, the greatest thing in the world. And because I don't think that's right, you know, I just can't play along with that.
Just on the subject of Japan, just because you briefly mentioned it there seems to be a lot more American women who are going over to Japan. There's a lot of promotions out there that are looking for American names as an attraction. Is there a possibility maybe that you think I could do this?
Oh, I pray so. I really do pray so. I would love to go to Japan. You know, at least attempt to try to hang there with the best Joshis in the world. That would just be, like, I'm a huge fan of, like, Bull Nakano, Minami Toyota, you know, all those women actually, like, all inspire me every time I watch them because they are so much different than what we are led to believe in America is good women's wrestling. And I would be not only honored, but I think I would be kind of speechless to go over there and actually be put in a situation where I'm around all these great women that've done so much and given so much of their hearts and their bodies to this business. I really think, like, I think it would be the most humbling experience I could ever have.
Well, you've wrestled Miyu Miyazaki. You wrestled her in the Queen of the Deathmatch.
Yes. So, wow, yeah. That was interesting because she didn't speak very much English, so it was a learning experience. And when we actually wrestled, we were standing opposite sides of the ring, and I went to pick up something. She's like, "This is on no!" And it's the first time I heard her speak English, and I was like, "Whoa!" But I could speak English. It was amazing. But like, if that's what it's going to take to be in Japan, then I cannot wait.
Well, that brings us round to AIW, Absolute Intense Wrestling, because you are their women's champion. You won it last year at Girls' Night Out 4 from Jessicka Havok. But I don't know if you heard our most recent Women of Wrestling podcast, the last one that we had. It was with Jessicka Havok, and she didn't have that many complimentary words to say about you.
Oh, she can just blow it out her ass. I don't really care. I don't know what I did to ruffle her feathers, and the fact that she can't specifically state one thing I did to her to tick her off, and the ridiculous suggestion that I canceled AIW and other bookings last minute. You can ask the owners of AIW. You can ask John Thor. I have never canceled AIW. The only show I couldn't make it to was a benefit show, and that's because 2 other bookings fell through for that weekend, and I was trying to find a way up there because they were going to give me gas money, but I didn't want to take their money for a benefit show for somebody, that had passed and that I, really respected and wanted the money to go to the family. So we were trying to figure that out, but we couldn't figure it out. And I even sent some stuff up to be sold so that way the money could go to the family. So I really don't know what her problem is. I have no problems with her other than the fact that she wants to run her mouth, and one day we will meet. It's a small business, and I'll fix it.
Well, Girls' Night Out 6 is coming up on April the 15th, and I guess this kind of brings us round to this announcement that we talked about at the start of this podcast. I'm just going to give you the floor for this, so it's all yours. You go for it.
So, Girls' Night Out 6 is coming up, and unfortunately I will not be able to make it. And it's not due to anything with AIW. I respect AIW. I thank them for every opportunity they've given me. They're actually one of the few companies in the wrestling business that treat women with respect and nobility, and I actually really appreciate that. That's why I have to do this now. I recently found out I'm pregnant. I'm expecting my first child, and so therefore, under my own suggestion, I have called AIW and told them I'd like to forfeit the belt. I don't want to take the chance of wrestling and hurting, an unborn child. With that being said, I've also made it known that I would like to suggest a match. They don't have to do it if they don't want to, but I think it would probably be the most fitting match to try to announce a new winner, to push AIW forward, because AIW's got so much momentum behind their women's division. I don't want to see them lose that. So I'm actually trying to put in my vote. I really hope they follow through. I think Mia Yim versus Allison Kay would be the best match to determine who's the new AIW Women's Champion. And that being said, it's because their last match was such a battle, and then Allison Kay got her nose broken by Mia Yim, so this is going to have so much heart behind it, and I think the people deserve to see a champion crowned out of this. With that all being said, also, I want to tell you that I'm not quitting wrestling. I fully plan on coming back after I give birth, just because I think I'll have a whole new reason to go full into it, because I want my child to be proud of me. I want my husband to be proud of me. So, thank you to all the AIW fans and the promoters and the wrestlers, and I hope this news finds them, in good spirits. But hopefully, after I have my baby in 9 months, I will come back better than ever.
So there you have it, because there had been talk about you saying, when you put on your Facebook saying, I'm not going to be accepting any more bookings. There were people who said, are you retiring? And
No.
That's
Definitely
not the case.
not retiring. No. If I retire, trust me, I'm going to be one of these people that actually retire, not one of these people that say they retired and then quit and then come back 3 months later, I promise. But I know that I'm too hooked on wrestling. I love wrestling way too much to ever say that I'm going to quit right now. I just got to take some time off.
Well, that makes total sense. I want to say congratulations for your pregnancy as well. I hope it's a safe, healthy, and happy one.
Oh, me too. I'm hoping for a boy, but I'm okay with anything that comes out as long as it's healthy. It doesn't beat me up too much.
Well, I've got to ask right now, have you got any, I know it's probably very early days, but have you got any names in mind?
No, not yet. No, me and my husband are actually figuring that out. And I think if it's a boy, we're going to try to honor the memory of one of my late friends. And if it's a girl, I have a couple of names in mind, but I'm not going to tell them yet.
And when are you due?
Right now, they think at the beginning of December.
Excellent. All right. Well, I just want to again congratulate you on your pregnancy, and
Thank you.
I do hope you get the boy that you're after.
I hope so.
But
because Lord knows if it comes out like a little mini me, I'm probably going to pull all my hair out.
That could be interesting. That could be very interesting.
Tag team partners.
Will you be at Girls' Night Out 6 though? Will you be there in any capacity?
I'm still hoping to make up to watch the show and get to formally turn over my belt. Yes.
Excellent. So there's a chance that you may still see Mickie Knuckles at Girls' Night Out 6 in Cleveland on April the 15th. But as far as you taking the time to speak to us today, Mickie, and giving us the information and just clearing up a lot of the rumours are concerned, I can't thank you enough. You've been very open and honest with everything that we asked. I know there was some difficult sort of questions in there, so I really appreciate you being so frank and honest with us.
I thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain everything to everybody, because I really wanted to clear that up. I didn't want anybody to think, that I was done with the wrestling business, because if anybody knows wrestlers, how many times do wrestlers say, "Oh, I'm done, I retire," and then they come back?
Oh, a billion times.
I didn't want anybody to think I was falling under the same pattern. So.
Well, Mickie, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us here on the Women of Wrestling podcast here on ringbellsonline.com.
Well, thank you for having me.
And for everybody who's listening as well, we will be back very soon. Hopefully Stu should be back with us